Finally be alive. We have been looking forward to this for like weeks, isn't it? So as
Yes.
you've heard, all of you have joined. This is very free-flowing. Feel free to ask questions on the chat or on the Q&A. We'll try to get to them in the middle if it makes sense, or there'll be certainly a lot of time at the end for questions. And the way we're going to do this is, yes, I don't have loads of questions. I'm sure this is going to be super fun from the audience questions itself. But I'll kick it off by asking a few questions that I have. And I'm going to start now. So this question is going to be for both of you, Benjamin and Gek, but I'll start with you, Gek. You can go first.
Sure.
And the question is,
ladies first. I say ladies first. Yeah.
Just tell us about your journey. What brought you to the world of development? Your experience with test automation, and of course, how did you find karate, and how did that go? Go ahead, Gek.
Oh, that goes way years back. And so what happens, since young, I always like computers. So I got my first computer at the age of 12. So in university, I did computer science, and naturally I start off as an intern. And from then onward, I'm always into IT development work. So as you can see from my portfolio, I work in many different countries in Asia, Japan, Singapore, China, and also in North and South America. And now I'm based in UK. So I'm a global citizen. And I like about development work is I'm quite an innovative person. I like to find solutions and also find creative way. And automation naturally comes to me because I like to do things in the easy way out rather than repetitive manual testing, or manual tasks. So anything that I can automate, I will automate so that I can have more time. And I stumbled onto karate back in September 2020. So that was a very interesting journey for me, into using karate.
Okay. Benjamin, how about you? What's your journey like? And go ahead.
Oh yeah, my journey also goes way back to the school days and playing with Commodore 64 that my friend had at his house, and just being fascinated with computers and programming and teaching myself basic, and then slowly moving into the professional world, first as a freelancer for 6-7 years or so, and then moving into the games industry, making front ends for web games first. But when this was canceled, I was transferred to a tools and services team for games. And that's where I got in touch with QA, with the different types of software testing. I began my journey into test automation with Selenium, and being fascinated by just having the browser click through the applications by itself. And then through that, I slowly decided to go fully into this field and bring my development experience to it. And this is still part of my mission, to have clean code principles and design patterns and things like that in test automation, because I see there is quite some lack in some cases. Then when I joined Trivago a few years in, at first I was only there for UI testing. We had a challenge to do API testing, and then we did proofs of concept with different solutions. And one of them was karate. And the more I used it, the more I liked it. Because honestly, at first I didn't like it. But then it totally grew on me. And now it's probably my favorite technology to do API testing. And I also started using the UI testing part lately. So it's becoming my favorite framework for sure.
Awesome. And that's again a repetition for those who may not have caught that very well. When Benjamin first saw karate, he didn't like it that much, and we'll try to get into that more later in this session. So this question again, it will be for both of you. I'll start with Benjamin. It's is about API testing and how people generally perceive API testing. I believe that there are some misconceptions about API testing, that it is harder, needs more programming knowledge, and it's not good enough to do all the testing that you need. And Benjamin, I'm really interested to hear your answer about this, because you started out with hardcore UI/Selenium, and then you kind of adopted API testing. What do you think about this aspect? Is API testing harder? But yeah, take it away. Just expound.
No, API testing is not harder. API testing can be way, way easier if you have well-defined endpoints, if you work with JSON or XML or any format that is easy to parse. It's getting a little harder when you do things like gRPC and protobuf and stuff like that. But still, I would say API testing is easier. It is faster. It is way less flaky. It is often neglected, even though it's such an important part of the applications. I don't say do everything with API testing, but do most of it with API testing. Do that first, and then worry about how the UI deals with it. Because, yeah, even though I still love UI testing, I know it is more costly, it takes longer, it is way more effort to get it less flaky. And I don't think you can achieve 100% flaky, less UI testing. So you have to have also much more strategies around that from the team, how to deal with flakiness, how to interpret the results, how to take the next steps. So all of this is much easier with API testing.
What about you, Gek? Is API testing harder? What do your teams feel about this in general?
Okay, so for me, because I start off from on-premise software, so we were doing the back-end testing, right? And then I moved to another product, which is in the cloud on the we move away software as a service, SaaS, and then we have to realize that actually, API in my work, API always come first. So it's API first, then UI. Yeah. So there are several API tools available at that time. You need to be a good coder to write it. So in my culture is developer is responsible for the quality of the software they develop. So they write their own test case. For tester are mainly just there to, look after the test plan, verify the test journey, and help to cultivate the quality culture. So in this way, we always want to find a very good API tools. However, when I have a team of testers who are doing manual testing, and they are doing the end-to-end. So what to them, they are interacting with the UI first. So they are, not able to see the behind magic of the UI interfacing they are using. So for them, you cannot tell them about API first. You have to use a different kind of tool to impart the automation mindset into them. And that's why Karate was the tool that I look into it, because I want a Swiss knife that can do API, UI, and easy to adopt in a group of people who may or may not have programming background. Yeah. So that's why.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's great, and this is kind of consistent feedback that I get, that Karate kind of makes it easier. You don't need to be a great programmer to use it. In fact, many cases where non-programmers actually thrive, writing automation is great. So it's good. I want to go back to Benjamin, because so Benjamin, you didn't like Karate when you saw it first. Can you explain? And for the benefit of everyone listening, right? Benjamin is actually close to releasing a book on karate. Is that right? So
Yeah.
that is an amazing turnaround. So can you walk us through that and this thing and go ahead. Yeah, why? And what now?
Yeah, I come from hardcore Java enterprise development initially, so it was first hard for me to accept the way how you write code. I mean, I had been using Cucumber before as a layer on top of heavy coding, so that was all right. But not having this glue code in the background was just weird to me. But still, it worked. So I was actually voting to do rest assured or even a Java only solution for API testing, but I was overruled, and rightly so, because I wouldn't be the only one using it. So we had to think about testers that weren't 100% developers. I mean, all of our testers here at Trivago have coding skills for sure, but still being onboarded to a solution for API testing that requires some heavy lifting in terms of code is not a good choice. So, and it's actually fun. I mean, the more I started using it, also for exploratory testing of APIs, I found out that I was much quicker with it. And recently I got to write a lot of supplementary code for karate because we have some very specific problems to solve. So this is also fun that it's extensible by JavaScript and Java. So this is really helpful. Yeah, and it really grew on me. So I decided to write a book, which will be available on May 19th, called Writing API Tests with Karate. Shameless plug. So it's on pre-order.
Well, that's awesome, and it's not. That is great to know, and I really want to back up because something you just said really surprised me. To be honest, you said that you used karate for exploratory testing. Is that right? And can you explain that more, Benjamin?
Yeah, I mean, you can, like you can do with UIs, you can also exploratory test APIs. If you call an endpoint and you get something back and you know a list of endpoints and you just start experimenting with it and sending data and then just changing that data, maybe stripping some fields or adding some, and then just seeing how it reacts. And for me, it's easier to just do that in karate tests directly, like in scenarios, than firing up Postman and and clicking through all the endpoints. So it just feels more natural.
Yeah, and that is, I'm reflecting on that. I'm going to think a lot about that because there are not many people, honestly, who look at karate as an exploratory testing tool. So what you said just now is very interesting, as I said. And I can imagine because for those who like scripting and playing around with code, karate is useful to do the kinds of things that you just talked about. So it's super interesting. I'm just making an observation here. And let's come to Gek. And the question is, the topic now is hybrid testing. Okay, so I know that you do both API and UI testing. And of course, your organization and teams have tried various tools over the years.
Yeah.
Coming to hybrid testing, I'm curious, do you actually do that in the sense you have API and UI flows in the same test? Do you see a connection, and how do you approach such kind of testing?
Yes, the reason is when we have like just API feature test written in karate, right? Those are the teams may only handle the backend teams. They only handle those parts. But again, we have front end teams that also handling the UI, right? And instead of like you want to connect both of them together instead of writing different tests in another different framework, you can reuse those API tests you have into your UI test so that you actually call the API to check that the data is there before you go and check on the elements and see if you get the results in the UI. So you can actually improve the waiting times of your UI test. That's why I call it a hybrid test. So you actually can use your API to set out the test data. And then when you do your UI test, it will be quicker and more reliable because you always use the API to check first. Yeah. And I think that is the best advantage of using Karate. Yeah, because you don't really need to write things from fresh, and you can just compose it like Legos, use small little bricks, and then you start to build out your house.
Awesome. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Benjamin, what about you? Do you still have segregation of like API tests only and then UI tests, or are you starting to see some merge happen, or do you want that to happen?
Slowly, we're starting because we had the in-house UI testing framework for I think 6 years now, so it's not that easy to migrate the hundreds, maybe thousands of test cases we have now. But we see more and more use cases where we can actually do those hybrid things, like doing UI tests and taking information from the UI that we can send to another API, either for checking of different logs or something else. I mean, even we can do authentication like this. I mean, you log in the website, get the token, and then reuse that token for whatever API that follows. So yeah, I completely agree with Gek. It makes everything faster. But it can also, and that's where the controversy comes in, it can also be more confusing to have this together.
The controversy. What do you mean? Can you give an example? And yeah, let's talk about controversies and stuff that we probably don't agree on. And I know we don't agree on a lot, but we agree on a lot also, which is great. But
yeah. No, I mean things like if you are an expert in UI testing, like exploratory testing the UI, and you see an automated test where it's mixed with API, or you're an expert in backend and you see a test that is mixed with UI stuff, then it can be quite strange at first to have this mixed. So in any case, there is some knowledge sharing and onboarding needed if you have this. If you come together at first, which is the ideal case, if the teams join and then talk about this and then create those test cases together, then it's another story.
No, brilliant. And I'm also thinking through this, right? And maybe, someday in the future, Gek and Benjamin, we'll collectively write maybe a best practices document on how to do hybrid testing. And based on what you just said, Benjamin, I'm thinking if you do hybrid testing, I think it has to be very carefully structured. Maybe you do an API at the start and then do the UI stuff, or maybe, you know what I mean, right? There should be two distinct phases. One is like to set up data and then to validate in the other channel. Perhaps, I don't know, I'm just thinking loud, but yeah, I agree with your point that you shouldn't end up with these horribly monolithic tests that do UI here and API here, and then it's going to really, besides triggering people who like to stick to only one layer, it probably has maintainability implications and a lot more, I guess, that I haven't even thought about yet. So that is cool. So for both of you again, and I'll start with Gek, when you choose, this is now in general, right? We're not really talking about testing, but what would you look for, and how did you finally make the decision to choose whichever automation tools that you finally ended up using?
For me, I have to look at the product requirement, the test requirement for the product, the people that I have to work on using the tool set. And especially we are a big company, so we have a lot of security, legal compliance and things like that. We can't just pick something out and then straight away use it. We have to convince the stakeholder the return on investment. And for the for the product which I chose Karate for, right? Not talking about the other products, right? Because there were like different requirements. was that we need something that we can test on API, UI, and UI we have like web application, mobile app, right? So it's one tool that can do everything, yeah. Plus the skill set of the people I have, I need to ramp it up fast because there's no point of spending like months or years training a group of people to write automation tests. So I have found Karate to be the one because it's easy to write. I did mock programming with a group of testers and of different capability, and it's kind of like it suits it all. But if I will have to look into a new product again, and I will say again, show me what are the product requirements. If let's say it's API intensive, we can say we can use Karate because commerce teams have been trained in Karate, so we don't have to waste time to ramp up people. So there are a lot of factors that you have to consider in choosing automation tools, and also how often this tool is being maintained too. It matters to us. Yeah, there's no point of getting a tool that nobody looks after. There's no community support. That's it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great list. A lot of things to really think about when you choose a tool. It's and you're absolutely right. I've heard so many horror stories of people choosing a tool that happens to be open source, and then nobody maintains it, and then you're stuck and you need to rewrite all your tests.
Yeah.
Benjamin, what about you? I think any thoughts you want to add in terms of choosing a tool? You are apparently looking at trying to move away from your existing UI automation framework, but what do you look for?
Yeah, it depends on the project. I mean, it's you shouldn't stick to the Maslow's hammer, like have one tool and then try to solve all the problems with it. But you have to carefully look at what is needed. And if you have a tool that can do both API and UI testing and even mocking, which is another capability that is just amazing about Karate, then it's a good candidate because you can solve more than just one problem with it. For us, it's a little bit difficult in terms of the UI part because the in-house framework is so well known now and everybody's familiar with it. So we have the same kind of situation. When we need UI tests, we tend to stick to this one because people already know it. That's why I'm always happy when there's a new project popping up where you can actually try out something different, like when it's in the early phase. So that I would add that. Try to introduce a new solution or test out new solutions in new projects and not in existing projects, because it will be a huge effort to just migrate everything.
And that's great. Thanks for that. And a thought just struck me, which is, I think APIs are more durable than your UI. You know what I mean, right? I think.
You mean the UX interface changes? Yeah,
right.
Where you have to change your selectors. Yeah.
For example, I can go on this big rant on JavaScript frameworks, right? React, Angular, Vue, whatnot. Something's getting invented every other week. So my point is that I think the technologies that you choose for your UI are going to keep churning a little bit. But if you write a test for your APIs, in my mind, and this is my experience also, and probably your experience as well, that test suite tends to just stick around for months and years. You know what I mean, right? So I'm not making any. I'm just making this observation that, as you said, Benjamin, right? Once you have got a bunch of tests sitting there, the test suite, that's your regression test suite, it's very, very hard to switch away from that to some other technology. And in my mind right now, I think APIs are the kinds of tests that stick around for a long time, right? And you kind of bet your core business functionality on that. Anyway, wow. So let's look at the questions, and I'm just scanning One quick question that's easy for you to answer, Benjamin. Who is the publisher for your book?
It's Tech Publishing.
Okay. And there is a question on mocking, but I wanted to do this and I forgot. Benjamin, you mentioned mocking, and yes, that's one of the features that I wish more people used. Do you use mocking, or do you aspire to use mocking? What are your thoughts on API mocking?
I strongly aspire to use mocking, especially with those projects where APIs are under development and are maybe do not exist yet, but we already should test the future functionality. Then it can be a great thing to just mock APIs. Or if you do actual data validation and you need to be sure that the response you're getting is always the same. Because depending on the API, it can be that, like in Trivago, when you search for hotel prices, they keep changing and you get different results every time. So it's a great thing to validate that everything is working correctly when you have a fixed set of mock data. So I'm definitely planning on using that more.
What about you, Gek? Are you using mocks at all?
Yes, we are using mock. Yeah, definitely. And that's why when we have to choose a testing automation tool, we will put in one of the criteria is whether it can do mocking or not. Yeah. And that's why we chose Karate. So, and the other thing you mentioned about the API test when you have your test suite, and we are looking is using Git-Lin with Karate for performance testing. Yeah. So we can reuse those tests, so we don't have to rewrite those tests again. Yeah. It's all about speed. And also we need to think about the automation tool is how well it can integrate it into the CI/CD pipeline. So you don't want to have a tool that you cannot integrate into it. Yeah. So that is my advice to anyone who's looking into automation tools for their project. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we think like much broader view before we choose our candidate. So when it's like, let's say, make this tick box, tick, 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 tick. People will say, okay, we will use it. If it doesn't make it, we'll cancel it. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned the Gatling, the performance testing capability that you get from Karate. I'm super biased, of course, but in my book, that is certainly a great reason for you to do more API testing, because in the world of Karate, if you have functional tests, you can just turn them into real performance tests, without much effort, which is kind of cool. So, something for all the listeners to consider for sure. Speaking of mocking, we were just talking about mocking. Yeah, one of the questions by Ernst. In my company, we use a CI/CD Jenkins pipeline with mock tests. We have not implemented contract testing. And Ernst, I think, Kapil has already answered a couple of comments under your question, and there's a link to a blog post that I wrote a couple of years back. So there's a lot of information there. Yes, using Karate, there is a very good story for contract testing in my mind. In fact, Karate approaches contract testing a little differently, that contract tests are just yet another functional test, and you don't need to worry too much about, contract testing means I need to do some totally different things. We don't believe that needs to be the case, but take a look at the blog, and do let us know what you think, if possible. I'd be very happy to take some feedback on that. I'm still going through the questions. There's a question from question on, what is the interest? Yeah, I think this is controversy, and I'm going to delegate this to Benjamin because I'm
biased.
The question which is, what is the interest of specifying tests? Yeah, I think it's flashed on the screen. Thank you. As Gherkin, right? So is it meant to be used as living documentation? Let's hear what you have to say about this, Benjamin, and of course, I'll pitch in if needed. Go ahead.
I really believe it's a nice thing to specify tests as Gherkin, because they're just understandable. They're even for developers. If you read something like, I log into the application, it's much more descriptive than seeing the piece of code that actually does it. So yes, it can act as a form of living documentation, but more importantly, when we look at the test reports, you instantly see what failed. You don't have to look through the code. You don't have to look at stack traces. You instantly see, and I log into the application failed. And then you can go from there. It's just a time saver for us. And you can show those tests to non-developers, to people that don't regularly look at those test reports, and they will also understand what's going on. So I think it's a good thing.
Great. And yeah, I have nothing much to add. I think one comment I want to make is that I've seen too many teams more than not choose Cucumber and misuse it. It doesn't end up being implemented the correct way. So Karate, took this rather controversial decision to, not care about DDD as a concept at all and just stick to, you want to do test automation, let's try to make that part as simple as possible. And, a fun fact is that Karate actually, if you look at it, has more GitHub stars than Cucumber, all the good Cucumber projects, which is interesting. So it turned out that way. So there is a popularity contest going on if you want to look at it that way. So, just saying. Looking at one question that's coming from Giancarlo, I'll take that one. The question is, can Karate be used for API security testing? And the answer is no. No, in the sense that Karate doesn't explicitly, we have not put any effort into making Karate work for security testing. And I think it would be easy to do, honestly, so if you, Giancarlo, or anyone listening would love to contribute, I believe there's an easy way to use the data-driven capabilities of Karate API testing to actually extend into security testing. There's a lot of opportunities there. That said, I'm going to use that question as a segue to get into one of the questions I had for both of you, Gek and Benjamin, on this whole AI thing that we're hearing nowadays, right? Generative AI is all the rage, isn't it? And I'll start with you, Gek. Do you have any thoughts on, is that going to change the game? Is testing going to be irrelevant? Are we all going to be out of a job? What do you think?
I don't think we will be out of the job. They always need someone even to coach the AI. AI needs so much data. And I myself play with OpenAI and ChatGPT for my own knowledge. And Karate is known to ChatGPT. You can use ChatGPT to write Karate API test. So folks, you can go and try and start out your first Karate test. And in fact, AI was one of the topics that I handled when I was 19 years old. So that was many years back, and it's more aware to the public because like every technology, it takes 20 years or more to let the public to adopt it. So I will see that we will not be out of job. In fact, we will have the opportunity, to invest more into the AI technologies and help us into a better automation. Yeah.
Awesome. And then let me get that straight. You talked about ChatGPT being, it knows Karate. You actually tried using it to generate Karate. Is that right?
Yeah. But it's not for SAP SAP testing. Yeah, it's just for my own to check out the functionality, what it can do. Yeah, like I try OpenAI to generate SQL statements and stuff like that. The best way to learn is to try hands-on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, this is great. And I'll just add on to what you're saying, right? Karate, fortunately, has been around for 6 years. So, ChatGPT knows a lot about Karate because ChatGPT is, I believe, right now the cutoff of the information that it has is like around September 21 or something like that. So I did ask a few vanity questions about, hey, ChatGPT, what is Karate automation testing? I got good answers back. I was so thrilled and surprised at the same time. And yes, by the way, I'm also just to add on to what you said, there are some customers who use Karate saying that GitHub Copilot is working really well. So, I think we can add that to ChatGPT as yet another option to make API testing hopefully, easier for teams to write in the future. So I'm certainly with you, Gek. I'm looking at things in a positive light. Benjamin, what do you think? Do you have some differing thoughts?
A little bit, yes. I strongly, because I am a pessimist, I see the negative aspects of it. I don't think we'll be out of the job. No way. We need even more testers and QA to keep this thing in check. And as long as it just generates truth and false information in the exact same way. So if you don't know about this subject already, you have no idea of telling if it's true or not, then we definitely need more testing and also more regulations. Another danger is when you actually try to use company relevant information and disclose it to those open AI. It's funny, it's called open AI because it's not.
Yeah.
If you disclose this information, it actually learns from it. It will also give this information to your competitors. So this is a danger that you should be aware of. On the other hand, for fun, I tested a lot of it, and you can really have a lot of fun with it just by generating stuff, generating song lyrics, or analyzing your pieces of code and asking it, okay, how could I make this better? But you need to have a certain kind of knowledge to really know if this is better or not, what it gives you. And sometimes it just gives you plain wrong information. I had a lot of occurrences of that happening too.
Well, that's brilliant. And I really I keep wondering about that thing that you talked about, Benjamin, which is you made a point that you need to have a certain amount of domain knowledge in order to be successful, right? You use ChatGPT kind of things as a tool, but you need to be pretty good at programming in order to use ChatGPT to make a super awesome program, that you finally, envision. But at the same time, you hear about all these stories. Although I'm taking a lot of these stories with a pinch of salt, right? You keep hearing about stories where I any coding and I just typed in this spec into ChatGPT and I got a working code that I put on the App Store, and it's kind of ridiculous. But I think I'm going to summarize at this point, which is I feel the need for testing, as I think both of you said, Benjamin and Gek, I think it's going to be even more relevant than before. You're going to have potentially one possible future is that you're going to have all these APIs and applications created by AI and robots. You need humans to test these, otherwise there's no where do you draw the line? You know what I mean, right? There has to be the last stand by humans somewhere. So that's how I think about it right now. I do personally feel that APIs actually are going to be more relevant than before, because from what I can make out right now, and everything is changing like by the hour, you know what, right? I think it's impossible for us to predict what's going to happen in AI right now because it's just changing so fast. But I just want to make this one comment that a lot of what I see about OpenAI, for example, and there's something called OpenAI plugins.
Yes.
A lot of the backend, the actions and the infrastructure that you want done. I mean, when finally you want to do some useful work after ChatGPT has given you an answer, is through APIs. Okay, and I personally believe, at least right now, that there's going to be a demand for well-tested APIs that can be connected to all these AI intelligence and AI agents that are going to start appearing potentially. So, do more API testing. It's going to become more important. Is probably what I'm trying to say. So this is great. Let me check. Question. I think there's a comment from Marianne on Marianne uses SpecFlow and BDD. It works fine. Yes, as I think Benjamin said, BDD has great intent. The theory and the the concept is great, right? What if you could write tests in a natural syntax, understandable by the business, and then you can modify that and it actually gets the work done? I think one of the things about true BDD, at least the way that Cucumber and SpecFlow, start. What happens when you start using these kind of technologies is that there's a lot of glue code and boilerplate code that you need to write also that I think people tend to forget needs to be written, and then becomes a surprise, and then some team is left, holding the bag, having to maintain all of that, and it becomes. I've seen personally a lot of projects that didn't do well with Cucumber, so that's where I'm coming from. But I'm sure there's plenty of you out there who have, seen BDD at its best and all that. But I think personally, it's not that often that it happens. Dorothy has another question. Are you familiar with test automation patterns.org? The patterns are more focused on system level testing. API testing is mentioned, like a pattern interaction level. That's great. I personally, Dorothy, don't have a great, I don't think I have enough to answer that question. I haven't looked at test automation patterns.org, to be very honest. I look at APIs at this black box that, okay, APIs are interfaces that do useful work either for other systems called the APIs, or a user interface component that calls APIs. In case Benjamin or Gek, you have any thoughts on that, feel free to chime in, or yeah, we could move on. So
Peter, Peter, just to mention there, Dot actually created with Saretta and Gamba the test automation patterns wiki, which we host at Eurostar. So I think what she's actually also suggesting there is if you had any input, because it's very much so a community get involved, community give feedback wiki. So I'll share that in the comments, and if anybody does have anything, and if Karate Labs, if there's anything from an API point of view that you would like to contribute to that, we'd love to hear from you and include that. I think that's probably the point, Dot, if I have that right.
Oh, sounds great. Yeah, sure. We'll look at that, and if we can, hopefully we can meet Dorothy at a conference happening soon. So yeah, awesome. Yeah, just a few more minutes, I guess. So let's get to the end of the questions that I had. Yeah, we covered the AI part. Yeah, here's a question which is for Benjamin, and let's let Benjamin go first. Any advice for teams that start out with karate? From your experience, what would you advise? Go ahead.
So just pretending there's a project and the team has already discovered karate and said we're going to use it. So I would say start small. Go for the low-hanging fruits. Just automate first what you do over and over, the little things. Like if you every time the API changes, send the same data to it and just check if you get a 200 back. Automate this first, get a feeling for the framework, and then go from there. You shouldn't take one of the complex scenarios and try to work on it, because even though karate is relatively easy to get started with, it's not a no-brainer. So you need to get a feel for the framework as well. That's what I would say.
Gek, what about you?
For me, I would say take a look at the Karate Labs example and choose a good IDE, whether you like Visual Studio or IntelligentJ. Yeah, and you try with the plugin and compile it and run it, and try not to do it in silos. Pair with the buddies, and you get to learn more. In fact, if you want, try to do a mock programming session and get feedback from your peers, and that way you can actually learn much quicker. Yeah.
Oh, if I can add one thing, I just forgot it, because that's also something that's not too known about karate is that there is a Maven archetype that you can use to generate your project that already includes some really nice test cases to look at. So you don't have to spend time setting up your project by going through the documentation. You can just generate from the archetype, and then you have it.
Oh, thanks, Benjamin. Actually, you just reminded me of, I can share this right now. One of the new things we've added to the documentation is a GitHub template. So it didn't exist before. Did you see it already? So it's another probably easier option than the archetype, that you can just go to GitHub Karate Labs/karate-template. There's a GitHub template project. So it's easier to clone. You'll get a working project, and you don't need Maven installed. So that's kind of a cooler thing. And one of the nice things about GitHub is you could open that project on GitHub code spaces. So you literally don't need to install anything locally, which is a new trend I'm seeing in test automation, to be honest. So I thought I'll mention that. And I kind of feel bad now, Benjamin, that I don't think you could have, this came a little too late for you to add to your book, probably. So
Yeah, there will hopefully be a second revision. Let's see.
yeah, that's what I mean. We have, gotten feedback that people feel there's an easier starter example and an easier way to start getting, used to karate. So thanks. You called out rightly, the Maven archetype is a good one for teams to be aware of. And yeah, if okay, I see one more question. Preview of the karate roadmap by Hermano. There's there's one thing we are looking at, two things I'll mention. One, we are actually looking at some better playwright support. Playwright support is actually experimental, but we feel that we can actually make the same way that Karate today has very good support for WebDriver and Selenium, which means that Karate works with Sauce Labs, Browser Stack. I think, if your team uses Browser Stack, right? I mean, Sauce Labs.
We use Sauce Labs, we use Sauce Labs, and it's quite useful, especially you want to spin out lots of VMware,
So the same way that we have the Selenium support, we know that Playwright is like massively got traction now. There's a lot of teams, using Playwright. So if Karate could make it easier for teams to work with Playwright, that is something we are looking at. But officially, I can say API coverage and API recording, right? Can you record a test by using the IDE support that we have? And one last thing is that we are seeing so many of our users use Karate along with X-Ray, which is one of the very popular test case management solutions out there. So we are looking at an official integration with X-Ray. So yeah, those 3 or 4 points hopefully give you, Romano, a good idea of the roadmap. And with that, with just 5 minutes left, here's the last question for both of you. And I'll start with you, Gek. Which is, if you had to give one message to the whole testing community and all the listeners who are going to listen to this as well as the recording, what would it be?
Well, one advice I would give is API first, treat API as a first-class citizens, and especially we now move into microlibraries, headless architect. So we have to, design good API and put tests first. So make sure you always think about what tools you want to use and your product requirement. Yeah.
Awesome. Benjamin, over to you.
My advice would be, don't look at the tool first, look at the problems first that you want to solve, and then choose the tool, not going the other way around. And also be very cautious of the information you find online, especially on LinkedIn. I see so many people telling blatant lies about their solutions. So be very careful and do proofs of concept first.
There you have it. And from my side, please read the documentation. It's something I would certainly tell everyone, because we are actually thinking of creating more YouTube videos on how to use karate, because I think the attention span of the general public is shortening by the day.
Mm.
And great advice from both Benjamin and Gek. With that, I think we are at the end. We can close a few minutes early. This has been awesome. I'm so glad I had both of you, really experienced, test automation professionals and karate users here to share your insights about API testing and what kind of testing you should do more of. And I think we have a few few thoughts and really great insights into that. And with that, thank you, and I can hand it back to the team at Eurostar.